Hey, how's it going, guys? This is your boy Hazzed, and today we're going to be on the 7.3 PTR, checking out the new stuff on Frosty Case, also discussing PvP, PvE, and just going about the changes, because some of this stuff is actually very interesting, so let's jump into this. First, let's discuss some of the buffs going on, because a lot of them are very kind of crazy. Now, first off, we got a 27% increase to base damaging abilities. Now, they've actually changed that down to, it seems to be 25%. Originally it was 27, now it's 25, but it's still a overall buff to every single one of our abilities. Insane. Absolutely everything. Can't go wrong there. I mean, you just can't go wrong with that. It's everything. It's everything we want. But anyway, so the next thing we got is breath damage is increased by 10%, which, I mean, increased breath damage, you can't go wrong with that either. I mean, I ain't complaining. Alright, Icy Talons is increased by 5% haste, which stacks 3 times, so instead of being 30% max, it's going to be 45% max. Increasing overall consistency with that ability, which will play out in one of the builds I talk about later on. As for the next buff, we're going to be discussing Shattering Strike, which is going from 40% damage increase when it consumes 5 stacks of Razor Ice up to 60% damage, which it really excites me for that consistency PvP build I talked about in a couple videos ago. I made a guide about, and really excited to use that in PvP situations. Um, Now, Obliteration is going to go from a 8-second lasting proc to a 10-second lasting proc, so you'll be able to proc your Obliteration off of a lot of consistency attacks, and instead of using the Obliteration right away, you can wait a couple seconds and dump Frost Strikes if you need to increase your haste. Damage from Icy Talons, it's a nice little circle there. As for the next part, we got Permafrost, which is a melee damage absorb shield you get from melee attacks. And of course, if you're using Icy Talons, which increases your melee attack speed, you're going to get quite a bit of a melee shield on you. Going from 30% to 75%, which is definitely over double the original percentage. So that's going to be fairly well for staying alive in PvE and maybe even PvP situations, which we'll have to see how much exactly we'll be able to absorb off of that. Now, getting into kind of the negatives from this patch, we got some nerfs. We got Hungering Rune Weapon. It's going from 12 seconds to 15 seconds and granting 20% haste. Now, I'm not exactly sure why. Okay, it's going from 15 to 12 seconds. I had that backwards. I was like, I don't know why I was considering that a nerf. I mean, it is a nerf, kind of what they did, since our breath isn't as elongated, as we'll get to in a second. As you see with some of these talents, things look a little bit different. As to the next nerf, Murderous Efficiency, which is kind of the proc on Obliterate to give you that Howling Blast. See if we can find it under our abilities here. Meh, you get the point. It's under there somewhere. Anyways, so that's going to be decreasing from 65% to 50%, which is going to be a nerf to the overall Howling Blast spec, which kind of makes me angry. It's also going to be a little bit of nerf in PvP, but as you know, the overall increase in damage abilities is 25%, so that kind of overtakes those nerfs, so I'm not too complaining about that. Also, Horn of Winter cooldown is going to go from 30 seconds up to 45 seconds, so that's a pretty large nerf to Horn of Winter. I mean, we didn't really use it too much to begin with, but since they're aiming to actually reduce breath damage, that's probably a fairly good option. As for the next nerf, we're going to be taking down Freezing Fog another 10%. They just keep cutting the knees off a Howling Blast. They just want to dissect that so bad and actually move away from that current rotation, just relying on major Howling Blast procs, as I was talking before with the Shattering Strikes. Now, as for whether or not I think these are nerfs or buffs, definitely the change from Hungering Rune Weapon and Glacial Advance, those two items are switching spots. I feel like for breath spec, that's going to be a nerf, but for the consistency spec, it's probably going to be a bit of a buff. Now, Frozen Pulse actually switched places with Runic Attune up here, which I'm okay with that, because truth be told, that gives us a little more RP with the breath spec. to combine with Gathering Storms instead of choosing between them, even though, of course, Hungering Rune Weapon was a better choice to begin with, but now we can't choose that and Breath because it's in the same slot. Now you're probably thinking, why are these in the same slot? Doesn't really make too much sense to me. It'll make a little bit more sense when we get to the PvE side of the video. But first, we're going to talk about PvP and why this really excites me for PvP. Now, I've got a couple different build ideas I've been, circulating through here on the server. Now, it's really going to come down to whether or not you're going to be pushing rating or you want to keep on the strong consistency build. Because one of the things that we remembered early on in Legion at the moment was there was a lot of consistency builds going on, especially during EN, Heroic EN, and Mythic EN, because Breath of Sindragosa at that time wasn't very good, and it wasn't good in PvP. So a lot of people were still rocking the Icy Talons build to get that consistent damage. Now, what I'm excited about is the 20% additional damage to Shattering Strikes. I'll still probably keep Freezing Fog if it's PvP. I may go with Avalanche to get more burst out of it. And it really matters if I want to push rating. I'll still probably stick with Breath of Sindragosa. If I want to have fun and smash people in BGs and just, rotate my cooldowns over and over again, I'll probably go with Hungering Rune Weapon combined with Overpowered Rune Weapon, kind of like the Shatter spec recently, and just drop bombs on people. Because overall, we're getting damage increase on abilities by 25%, which is a fairly large buff, especially being that we're getting an overall buff to our consistency, a bit buff to more short-term bursty damage, which is going to be better in overall arena-orientated kills within smaller CC windows. We're going to have more now damage, less overall damage with the breath build. But what I'm noticing is there's definitely going to be a transition when it comes to PvE. Myself and PvE, since I am Legendary Helm, Legendary Ring, Breath build, I don't have the bracers. I'll still be sticking with Breath until I can, of course, pick up the new raid set, which I have the 2-piece, don't have the 4-piece yet. And I can't transition over into that yet until I get like the bracers and maybe probably just the bracers will do it really. But until I can do that and probably pick up the 4 set to drop the 2 set on my Howling Blast, I'll definitely still be staying Breath Howling Blast build because I can keep consistency and my AoE higher than if I was out of it. Now, as for people that are in current raid set gear, I can definitely see people going the Icy Talon build, keeping Freezing Fog. Maybe that's kind of an iffy thing, but definitely going Ice Cap, definitely going Frozen Pulse, and going Hungering Rune Weapon. Now, the reason that for being is we should go ahead and show the Frost DK 2 and 4 set every 60 rune power spent, increases duration of Pillar of Frost. Now, if you're running a consistency build like Icy Talons, and with Ice Cap, it reduces the cooldown. So think about that. You're elongating your overall Pillar of Frost with the cooldown of Ice Cap, and you're also increasing it with the 2 set. And of course, the 4 set increases your strength bonus of your next Pillar of Frost. So every time you build those up over and over again, increasing the cooldown time, getting your pillars closer and closer together, you're also increasing the potency, which instead of your damage starting out as a massive breath, you're going to get more consistency throughout the fight, and you're going to get a larger peak during the end of the fight instead of dipping down really far with breath and then, trying to keep your DPS up. Your DPS is going to be slowly raising as you kind of enclose on yourself. And whether or not you have, let's say a trinket to decrease the cooldown of Hungering Rune Weapon further, things along those lines are what's really going to mechanically put this spec, I'd have to say, pretty far ahead in the PvE orientated compared to Breath. I can definitely see this spec advancing very forward, at least a version of the consistency Icy Talent spec. Um, but as I was saying, I'm still sticking overall with Breath. So I am excited to see a couple of that stuff happen. So overall, I'm going to give you guys my opinion of this patch coming in 7.3, whether it's good for Frosty K's, whether it's bad, and overall I've got to say it's definitely good, and I'm pretty excited for these changes, especially seeing that we're going to get some kind of buff in PvP with these changes, and it seems to be some kind of buff in PvE, since we'll have a lot more consistency damage. Will be less based on our cooldowns, definitely be able to keep up with other people, and based upon the builds that we're able to play now, kind of like rocking Breath of Syndrago's The Gathering Avalanche. It's going to give even the breath spec a lot more consistency compared to just being on that damage. And the secret right now is like our breath is stronger. Our breath is a lot stronger at the moment in the short term. So if you're out in the world, world PvPing or something, you happen upon somebody and you unload breath on them with the new stuff, it's gonna hurt really bad. It's gonna be a really powerful breath, especially if you're Howling Blast build. It's just absolutely gonna tear people's faces off. And whether or not you're gonna rock that in duels, it's probably gonna be the better idea when it comes to 1v1 the world PvP situation, is just blowing somebody up with the breath spec. It's gonna be pretty wild to see, and whether or not you probably want to rock Runic Attune if you're doing that. But overall, this is going to be most likely what I'm building. Now, let's say you don't have like the legendary helmet or something. You could probably go Murderous Efficiency, keep your breath up longer, not relying on Howling Blast. But since I'm relying on that and the 2 set, they just kind of go hand in hand. Um, but overall, I'm really excited. Both PvE and PvP. Um, really stoked. I'd say it was an overall increase, at least on short term burst, like 400,000. So like easily able to burst over 2 million plus in the short term. Long term dropping down around 1.1 million, 1.2 million with this spec, which I can definitely, that's why I'm seeing the Icy Talon spec being able to overrun the Breath spec in the long run, and of course with the new 2 set. So we'll definitely see what happens from there. But overall, guys, I'm excited. PvP's looking a lot better. These changes are looking a lot better because they are going to be less reliant on major cooldowns. And I feel like you're giving us our claws back. We're not going to be declawed cats anymore. So anyways, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. Leave a like, and until next time, this was your boy Hazzed.